Hi everyone, it's Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. I'm here today with a beautiful collection. This is Camille. This is by Robert Kaufman. Debbie Vivas is the designer on this. It's a flower house collection. I think it's just perfect for spring. I love purple flowers in the springtime. We always seem to see those first. And this collection just reminds me so much of spring. So I'm here with a fun pattern. This is called 10 Square Scramble. This is a free download. Click the link below this video and you will see that link there. You can click on that. It'll take you straight to our website and you can download this for free. All right, so you've got your free pattern. I love that too. This is called 10 Square Scramble because it's using a layer cake. So the 10-inch squares. So we're going to use some 10-inch squares today. We do have kits available on this, and I do have a beautiful backing. I love this print. I just love the color in this. It's absolutely gorgeous. This backing is available as an add-on if you'd like. So those kits are limited quantity, so when they're gone, but you'd be able to pick up a layer cake and make this quilt. So here we go. Let me show you how I do this. So first of all, I've started with some 10-inch squares, and I just hand cut these. These are not an actual layer cake. I just hand cut some 10-inch squares just to show you quickly on video. I just grabbed 6 of them, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack them together, and I'm actually going to iron these together. Give it a little press. That's going to help those fabrics just become better friends, right? We like that. I want them to just kind of nestle together. So just give them a little press here, little steam. A lot of times when I'm using a pack of a layer cake or 10 squares like that, a 10 square pack, when you're using pre-cuts, you can usually just take off like the top 3 or 4 or 6, however many you're comfortable with cutting. I'm going to cut 6. Now I did take my rotary cutter and I did put a new blade in this. A fresh sharp blade is a must with this because you are cutting through so many layers. You're going to want to definitely use a fresh blade. All right, so here we go. So I have my squares. They're kind of all put together in a nice little stack here. All right, now I'm going to take a Creative Grids ruler. This is a 4.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. This was a new ruler for us. I found this ruler. It is perfect for cutting pre-cuts with. Because it's 12.5 inches, it goes on either side and it fits perfectly on my Creative Grids spinning mat, which I love. This is my favorite spinning mat. I use this, we use this upstairs in the sewing studio, probably daily. We're using our rotating mats up there, and we love the Creative Grids one. It is by far our favorite. All right, so let me show you how this is cut. So the first thing I'm going to do, if my squares are oriented this way, I'm going to turn this to the side and I'm going to cut this into 2 4.5 inch strips. So I do have a touch of extra. So I'm just going to square up this side a little bit, just like that. I'm going to take a 4.5 inch strip. There we go. And one more. Just like that. All right. We're going to rotate our mat back this direction. Now the first set that I cut, I need to cut a 4.5 inch squares, 2 4.5 inch squares. So again, I know I have extra. So I'm going to square this up a little bit. Just even everybody up on the side here. Kind of watching that stripe. I want to make sure my stripe is straight. I'm going to do a 4.5 inch chunk and another one. Just like that. And that's the large portion of our block. Set those aside. All right, now the next one we're going to do, I need 2.5 inch squares. I need 4 of them. So that is going to equal 10 inches. And I can see my squares are not quite even from hand cutting them. So I'm going to do 2.5 inches now. It's not the width of the ruler anymore. So I'm going to use the 1/2 inch side on the creative grid, so it adds your 1/2 inch in the beginning, 1, 2 inches, 2.5 is now a solid black line. I love that for lining up. Otherwise, if I try to do it from this side, I start with 1 inch, 2 inches and 1/2. And you see how the 1/2 inch is dashed? It's difficult sometimes to line up all those dashes and make sure you're lining up your ruler properly. So I love the turnaround feature on a Creative Grids ruler, so that I will use the 1/2 inch side here, like this. Here we go. So I need 4 2.5 inch blocks, 2.5 by 4.5, and 4. Yep, I have just an itty bitty bit left over right there. Okay, that's our block. That's your cutting right there. This is a block that I completed. This is where we're going. I'll turn this over so you can see pressing. The pattern is great. They have good visuals on how to cut, what you're doing. What they don't do is they don't tell you what direction to press. They tell you just to press. So I like to give you a little bit more instruction and tell you the way I would press, just to make the quilt go together a little bit easier for you. All right? So let's find some pieces here. All right, so we're going to start with these two and this. So the first thing in the pattern, you're going to put all of these together randomly. And you can do it random. That's what we did for the quilt behind us. You could try to follow a pattern, but we figured just random was fine. And we just started pulling fabrics. So we just had these fabrics all sitting out, and you're just pulling this one to this one to this one to this one, and just put them all together all the way through. All right. All right, so we're going to do that. So let's go ahead and sew these together. So I'm going to use my Clover extra fine patchwork pins, and I'm going to put one at the very end, just like this. And you notice I have placed this pin away from my seam allowance. I did that so that I can start here and sew all the way to the end, and I do not have to remove my pin. But this pin is going to prevent that fabric from shifting at the very end. That's generally where I have trouble with my fabric shifting apart. These two corners do not want to stay together. By the time you get there, they're trying to wander away from each other. It's like, no, stay together. So I pin them so that they do what I want. So let's go to the machine and get that done. Okay, so today I am using a Guidelines by Quilting seam guide. This is a miracle. If you do not have a 1/4 inch on your machine and you need help with that, these guidelines are pure magic. I absolutely love them. You can pick them up and put them back down on your machine. If you clean the bed of your machine with something like a lens cloth or something, that will help it stick better, because the oil from your machine is going to affect the stickiness on the back of this. These come in 2 different packs. You have a 6-pack of replacements, and then if you want to set your seam, a seam setter, then you also have the seam setter as well. So I have this set on here at a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to go ahead and go. All right, so we've got that sewn. Let's press this and talk about pressing. So when we were pressing, let me heat my iron up. So when we were pressing these, we press them to the darker fabric. It's not going to matter which way you press them, but I would always press to the darker fabric, especially when you've got a white here. I don't want a shadow behind that white fabric. I would prefer the shadow be in the dark green, not the white. So I'm going to press this with the dark green facing up, because I want my seam to go towards the dark green. All right, so we have the dark green fabric is up. I'm going to give this a press Warm that seam up, set it, open this up. You see how that just laid straight over for me, just like that. There we go. Perfect. That seam is now pressed toward the green. All right. Now I want to attach that to my large square. So again, I'm just going to line this up. Perfect. We're going to put a pin at the end. And if you feel the need to, you can pin this seam allowance as well, just to make it stay right where you want it. Okay? So my pins are down. I'm going to start here and go all the way to the end. All right, so now how am I going to press this? Well, let's look at the fabric. Let's let the fabric tell us. When I open this up like this, that seam definitely wants to go towards the block. So that's the way I'm going to let it go. So the block is up, we set our seam, and press towards the block, just like this. I'm using a wool pressing mat. I love the wool pressing mats for pressing. If you don't have one, you should grab one. This is just a 14 by 14 and it is perfect size for doing small blocks like this. You could even do pressing next to your machine so you wouldn't have to be up and down to your big iron if you didn't want to by putting this small pressing mat down. I love it. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the back. All right. That's the top of our block. Now I have done this one ahead of time and you can see I've pressed to the green and then to the block. So now when I put these two blocks together, these two seams are now going to nest together. I love a good nested seam. That's a quilt thing. All right, here we go. So I'm going to nest my seams in the center and I'm going to place a pin just on the other side of that seam. Let me show you where I put that pin, right here. The reason I put a pin on this side of it is as that machine is, as you're traveling across here, it will not move. This fabric is going to stay right where I want it to stay by putting a pin here. You're stopping it so that that fabric has to stay there. Therefore, that seam will be perfectly nested. All right, let me also pin the end because again, this is the part where I always have an issue. So I always take the time to add one pin at the end so that these corners stay together. Beginning, I know that's going to stay together because that's where I'm starting. Here, all the way down. All right, so now we have our block together. So now what do we do with this seam? Well, because these blocks are going to be put on a design wall, is the way I would lay this out. You make all your blocks, put them all on the design wall. Then you want the ability to rotate these blocks however you want to get them to fit together and get your color wherever you want it. So I would press this seam open. All right, so let's do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is warm up that seam and set it. Open my fabrics. I'm just going to give a gentle pull on the fabric just to kind of open that seam up. Split the seam. I love this Panasonic iron. It's got a sharp point on the end of it. It's not sharp, I guess it's a rounded point, but it's really nice for doing an open seam. The sole plate just travels right along there, opening that seam up as it goes. Turn it over. I'm going to give it one more press from this side because I want those seams to lie nice and flat. There we go. All right, and there's our block. Here's another block that I made. So you can see, if I were putting this on a design wall, I wouldn't want these fabrics and these fabrics touching. So I would spin it around, spin this around. This is probably how I would put that together, just like this. So now with these seams are open, that's now easy to put together. So you're going to hold it together like this. And I'm just going to line this up with that thread. I hope you can see that with the overhead camera. You can see how I'm lining up my seams. I'm just stacking them one on top of the other. All right, let's pin that now. So I don't want that to go anywhere. So I'm definitely pinning that one. This one, sometimes on these seams like this, I will take the time to put a second pin in on the other side of that open seam. There we go. Now I know that's not going anywhere. But you can see there's no nesting where you have this seam, you have a solid block. A solid block, here's your seam. So we don't have any nesting at all going the other way. That's why it doesn't matter which way you press this seam, the very first one we did. All right, let me get this pinned. All right, now I know, I already know what's going to happen. When I sew across this, you see how this seam is wanting to flip? I already know he's going to flip. So let's put a pin in that just to hang on to him. There we go. Now when I sew over that, it's on the bottom so I can't see it, but I know I'm not going to flip that seam. All right, so I'll see you at the machine. Okay, let's take our pins out. All right, now we look at this seam, and it just kind of wants to go everywhere, doesn't it? I would choose one way or the other. When I put this quilt together, I took the first row and I pressed all my seams to the right, and second row, all my seams to the left. That way, when I put my rows together, all my blocks nested with each other. That would be my recommendation. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this do what I want it to do and press it one direction and then press it again from the front, just like that. That is how quick and easy this quilt will go together. I think you could easily do this in a weekend. What a fun, beautiful project for spring. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please give me a thumbs up, and thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.